Hello, I am teaching artist Lauryn Welch. Welcome to our stream. I am here today with Professor Lieu, and today we are going to go over your entries for the January Art Dare, which was paper trail collages. But first, if your studio habits need a kick in the butt, I'm here in my studio. Art Prof has everything you need: tutorials, critiques, and professional development. So, Clara, can you kick us off with these amazing entries that we got for this Art Dare?
Yeah, the paper trail collages, it basically asks people to create a visual map of how they read the news. People did all kinds of media, traditional collage, digital collage. And if you guys want to go to our main site, artprof.org, we do have the 2021 January Art Dare page, and that page has all of the artist links, the artist statements, the images, so feel free to head over there so you can see the entire statements and get all the information on the artist, and the link is in the video description below. All right, so we are going to start with this first piece by Isaiah. And Isaiah says in their statement, they were motivated by the idea of using newspapers and that it was a way to bring an artist a multitude of ideas. So how did Isaiah do? What was their take on it, Lauryn?
Well, I am really enjoying this connection between the wanting to go back to the dream and then the Michelangelo. Is that Michelangelo? The touch, the atom and God touching. I don't remember the title to that. Anyways, I think that with these layers of transparency is really beautiful and ephemeral, and I get the sense of reading the news and then wanting to go back into this dreamland, basically.
I think what surprises me about this collage is the transparency. There's almost this frosty, translucent quality. I don't know how Isaiah did it. I mean, it says that the piece is made digitally, so maybe there was some transparency or opacity adjustment in there, but that's not a quality that I usually associate with newspaper collage. Usually it's a straight collage and it's very clear cut. And so I think in some ways, the transparency was a way to make the composition more cohesive, so it doesn't feel so fragmented. But at the same time, the text that's on top about the dream, it does pop forward. So to me, there's a lot of depth in this piece.
Yeah, and that's hard to do when there's so much text. The other thing that I noticed was how everything in the background here, or the things that are popping out to me, are all economic, which feels very hard and very gritty, very newsy, stuff that makes me want to go to sleep. And so I like reading into that as well for this piece.
By the way, you guys, if you are one of the artists featured in the stream, tell us so that way we know that you're here. For example, Anna's work that we're going to be looking at later, they are very excited to be here. So we're very excited to have you, Anna. And who here did the paper trail collage art dare? Let us know, because even if you're not a featured artist in this stream, it's really about the community making something together. Okay. The next piece we have is by Clara May Maxson. And Clara says, I was recently going through God's World News magazines from 10 years ago and thought it'd be cool to make some artwork. Clara says, I chose January 2011 edition and created a town with the articles. So this is interesting because it's 2011. I think most people did 2020. What's cool about this, Lauryn?
I think that I picked up on that 2011 right away, and I was thinking, oh, what is going on here? I mean, some of the images that are being used feel a little bit old, and it made me think, oh, wow, 2011, that was actually a long time ago, another world away. And so here we have this town that's basically an archaeological paper thing within history. This town basically doesn't exist. But then also what I love about this piece is the depiction of a literal town. I think a lot of times, or the results that I've seen for this art dare and people doing in the past have been topographical, have been related to geographical kinds of maps. Here we have these physical objects which are awkward and like very funny, but also very much related. I love the McDonald's is the food place, and the museum does have a little museum clipping in there. That relationship is funny to me. I like that.
Well, I really like this piece because there's a really broad range of personalities. And if you think about it, that's the way the news is. The news is sometimes they have a funny article just for entertainment. There's really serious stuff. There's the random article where you're like, okay, why did you guys write about this? And so I like that this map shows that range, because like the little dude that's in the truck, I feel bad for him. It's such a funny image. But then the McDonald's image with the frown is sort of tragic, and then there's a monkey in there. Like...
Yeah, there's a hilarious, I don't know if it's even sadness, maybe a dark humor to this world. But Clara, I love what you said there, how the news serves these different needs kind of the same way. A town has the 5 places you go to. You go to the grocery store, you go to the bank, and you go to the cooking section, you go to the finance section of the news. So that's cool.
You know what else is great too is the road, because the road is somewhat of a caricature. Most roads are not that twirly and fun looking. And so the road, to me, it holds together the composition, but it's also a little quirky, a little humorous, but then it says God's world in the left-hand corner. And it's so terrific, that balance. Yeah, like Seven Angelic says, it's a snapshot in history. It's not trying to curate what's being seen in the image. Okay, so let's look at the next artist. This is Anna Weeder Blank from the US. And Anna says, I wanted to convey the way that oversaturation of news media creates great anxiety. Found the only way to protect my mental health in these times has been to limit my consumption of news. You're not the only one, Anna. I'm usually such a news junkie, and I'm so addicted to All Things Considered on NPR because of cute Ari Shapiro. And I haven't been listening as much. Like, that's really bad, Lauryn.
Yeah, I shut off NPR. It just got a little fluffy when everything else was so tragic. I definitely read the anxiety and that pressure very intensely in this image. You have all these clashing ways of mark making, these colors, these figures that are really packed together. But then you have this portal, and the portal is super interesting to me because that looks like it's a different language. It looks like that's the news clip there. And it feels like either a window into another space or a literal, like an umbrella or a shelter against all of this anxiety coming in. And this person's looking up like, oh, what's going on?
Anna says also in the statement, I use the newspaper to create screens that you see on the phone and TVs. I also cut out brain shapes from the newspaper and collage them to the various figures in the painting. Yeah, it's cool because the figures that are outside of that little box area with the figure at the bottom, they're really verging on being humorous, but they're also so gritty and almost primitive that they really are another universe than the figure at the bottom. So I admire that range of stylistic choices within the same piece.
Also, that brain thing, I noticed the news on the brain, but it is hard to tell whether that is just another form of mark making and coloring in itself, or if that is news clipping. And so that integration works very well both formally, but also conceptually, if you're talking about how these figures have a lot of energy and anxiety. The words in the brain are feeding into their bodies or melding into their bodies. So that was cool.
Necro says, this kind of reminds me of an entrance exam assignment I did that also had the theme news. I also approached it with the anxiety feeling, but I used super dark colors. The colors are so strong and bold, but they're a little threatening too, which I think is good given the tone and atmosphere of the piece.
Yeah, in this piece, there is a lot of bright saturation, but the colors used have a disharmony to them, which is causing that. And that's one of the things that I love. Like, everybody associates bright colors with happiness and joyfulness, but there are ways that you can use them that really suggest things going wrong, or mania, or irritation, or anxiety.
Soyton Lee says, I've spent a lot less time on the news this year. It was just easy to get worked up over something. And Seven Angelic says, I think we can all empathize with that right now. It all feels like too much. The super violent colorfulness kind of invading the space. And Mad About Holly says that one hand of the news monster placed on the box adds to the threatening feeling. Yeah. It's a really rich piece, super textured. It's one of those pieces that you can really get lost in a great way. You can continue exploring it for a long period of time. Okay, this piece is by Sarah McGill from Canada, and the title of it is Self-Portrait of My Relationship with the News. And Sarah explains that it's an image of how they have read the news over their life. So if you guys look in the background, there are the Sunday comics that Sarah enjoyed as a kid. So if you guys look in there, it's really cool. I can spot all these comics. Mutz, Calvin and Hobbes, Blondie, Beetle Bailey, Hagar the Horrible. I mean, that was my childhood. Did you grow up reading newspaper comics, Lauryn?
Oh yeah, my dad would call them the funnies, and we would always fight over them because there were also the triplets that were interested in them too. So it took the whole day, all Sunday, for everybody in the family to get through the whole funny section.
I want to know in the chat, who remembers the Sunday newspaper being huge and heavy and being wrapped in the funnies? Because that was the highlight of the week. I used to go to Chinese school, which I hated. And on Sundays, on the way home, we would pick up the Sunday newspaper and I would read the funnies. It's totally a time capsule. People don't do that anymore. So I love that Sarah shows that. And by the way, Sarah provided these work in progress photos, which is so much fun if you guys look at the process of building. Like, what do you think about seeing these work in progress images?
Well, it looks like there's a 3D element to it, and I didn't realize that there was in the final piece. These areas, the nose and the eyebrows and the hair, they stick out. So that tuned me into that in the final work.
And so Sarah explains, as a young adult, I read mostly the life and opinion sections, and those are the clips of these on my face. And since 2020, reading the news has been an overwhelming whirlpool of COVID-19, daily reports, and bad news. I follow the daily CBC morning brief and coronavirus brief on my phone. So I built repetitive clips of these over the waves of hair, as my hair has been growing long during social distancing. Yeah, you noticed that right away, Lauryn, right?
Yeah, I immediately felt the durational quality of this piece. I actually didn't catch the funnies part first, where that was your childhood. I'm starting to understand that now, where that's in the background and the hair's in the foreground, the hair's current. But I was really struck by this repetition of this headline for the news over and over and over again. It really reminded me of my own experience during the beginning parts of the pandemic. Every morning, waking up, reading my news flash on the phone, doing this over and over and over again as my hair grew longer and I grew more disheveled. So I've got that connection with your piece there.
I just want to go back for a minute because Anna provided this comment, I did take a conceptual approach here with the collage and the colors. I intentionally made the color dissonant. We love it so much, you guys. When the artist is here and you guys can provide further commentary about your thought, I mean, it really, truly makes it feel like a classroom atmosphere. It really is not just about me and Lauryn. It's about really what all of you guys are talking about. All right. Let's go in and talk about some of the other references. So Sarah says, the woman illustration is part of a Globe and Mail column illustrated by April Della Noche Mille and various photos and clippings from CBC News. Yeah, I love that there's so many components to this, that it's not just, here's the news.
Right.
It's your life. As far as the way the news has grown, because, okay, older folks, do you guys remember the subscriptions where you would get the paper and it was this huge thing that you had to like hold, or you would have to like fold it, and like you would get newsprint on the ink on your hand, and reading the news is such a different experience now. Do you read on your phone, Lauryn?
I do. I actually have this fantasy of signing up for the New York Times. I used to house sit for someone who had a subscription, but the amount of work and also the amount of paper one would have to either store or throw away has made it so that I've never done that. So when people are using the actual paper as their element that they're collaging together, it really brings me back to that nostalgia. I don't know if it's nostalgia, but it's certainly this tactile longing for physical paper that you're reading. Digital just takes out so much energy, and it's like always there all the time.
Tell us in the chat, what device, or if you subscribe to the physical paper, do you guys read on? I always read on my phone. I pretty much never pick up the hard copy versions. And when I do read the news, it's always on the treadmill. On the treadmill or at breakfast. So I definitely associate the news with a very specific time of day.
Blue Wolf Spirit says that everybody's got their own way of reading the news, spread eagle, folded a certain way, etc. Totally.
I love that.
It's like everybody's got their own way of making coffee or holding a cup of coffee or something. It's that daily activity that's so monotonous, so every day, but it says something about the personality of the person that is doing it.
So Necro Nova says, I just noticed there is also a coronograph in the eyes. That's pretty neat. Yeah, have you guys noticed in all the entries, and we'll see more in a little bit, there's so much to look at. I mean, these are collages that would take time for you guys to work through. And not all artwork is like that. A lot of artwork sometimes just an immediate impact, which is great. That's another way to interact with an artwork. But this is work that really takes time to understand. Like Carrie Ann says, I understand the concept of a news collage now. Merci, Sarah. And Necro Nova says, I get my news through Tumblr memes.
Yes.
You ever had this, Lauryn, where you find out the parody of the news article before you've read the news article?
Yes, all the time. I think, and this is something that I have been bothering Clara about forever. I really would love an art prof dare that engages with memes somehow, because I feel like they are the new language of the world since we are so digital. I think that happens a lot where I see something that was originally posted on Twitter but is now screenshot and posted everywhere else, and then I have to go back and figure out what it is actually about. And there are whole podcasts that are dedicated to unraveling certain shareable memes or Twitter things or images that have a history or a news component to them.
Okay, so let's look at the next piece, which is by Crosby Morrow in the US. And Crosby says, well, admittedly, I am not a newspaper reader. I think I use the newspaper almost daily, whether I'm using it to build an armature for my sculpture, just using it to keep pastel and paint off my table. It's a constant tool I use. Do you use newspaper in that way, Lauryn? It's like a tar party thing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I save all of my newspapers that I do have because they're so much more functional as a surface for art or for making something rather than the text itself, which only lasts a day.
All right. So Crosby explains the plant is loosely based off two real houseplants I have, my syngoniums and aglaonemas. The leaves are just made of different cuttings of a newspaper. The stems are just paper tape and pieces of wire. And the substrate you see is ripped pieces from a brown paper bag that I dyed and curled to be like mulch or orchid bark. And the pot is made of exposed cardboard that I coated with a mixture of white chalk paint and wood glue. Awesome materials.
Yeah, that's design all the way down to the dirt, which is I like that there's that level of thought to make it all part of the artwork there.
Yeah, and it's seamless. Honestly, yeah. When I looked at it, I was so engaged by the plant itself and the leaves. I mean, I know the pot was there, but the pot didn't interfere with my ability to really get absorbed in the leaves. And I think a large part of that is because it is all fabricated. Like I could imagine some people would say, oh, I'll just get a pot. But I love that I love that the mulch has been made inside. That's awesome.
But also just on this other level beyond the technique of it, which is really good, is I like that it makes the news feel not important, kind of meaningless almost, or this blip in time. There's this certain, because first of all, the newspaper, that paper comes from some kind of tree or something that grows out of the ground and then gets cut down, dies. You know, it references this life cycle aspect to it, and also how this newspaper is also eventually going to go into some mulch at some point to grow a new thing. So there's this hopeful quality to it, along with these things will pass, or this too shall pass element to it, which I am enjoying.
And Carrie Ann says, great office plant to have. Must have been fun to make. Oh, this would be so cute in an office. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. My plants are always dying. Like I can't keep them alive. It's very sad.
Sam takes care of all the plants. I look at them and I don't know what to do.
Also, how cool is it that the emphasis of the pieces of newspaper used are on the more visual parts? Like that one really geometric leaf on the front is probably like a maze. You have the crossword puzzle. And so it's actually one of the entries we've seen so far that is not so text heavy, because the text you do see is so small that you can't really pick out words. And so it's a really different approach to seeing the news.
Yeah, definitely. Also, one of the only ones I think that I've seen so far that has used the crossword, which is my favorite section of the news.
I can't do crosswords. I get so mad and frustrated.
Yeah,
how do people do these?
Sam does them every single day, and I don't know how. I get stuck after the third question.
Tell us in the chat, who here does the crossword puzzle? I can't do it. It's like Sudoku. I can't do all those like.
Oh, I can do Sudoku. Sudoku is easy. But crossword actually requires some amount of cultural knowledge, like playing. What's not Wheel of Fortune? The other one with Alex Trebek.
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy. Yeah, it has a Jeopardy quality to it that I just am not versed in.
Okay, let's move on. And we're going to take a look at this collage by Madeline Bedrosian. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Madeline says, this art dare was definitely a little out of my comfort zone, but it turned out to be super fun. Knew I wanted to incorporate comics in some way, since that's the only reason I will pick up a newspaper. Other than that, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to make until I started. I had seen a lot of flower artwork recently, decided that would be fun to try, and the rest of the piece just sort of came from that. So what's your take, Lauryn?
I think the contrast in this piece is really nice. I love looking at each of these forms, and I don't find them to be necessarily the straight up iconic version of any of these forms. For instance, the flowers have this three-dimensional quality to them. There are actual petals on there that are coming off of the paper, but also that tree. I think I'm mostly really into that tree. It's so windy and curly and organic, and it is just very pleasurable to look at.
And I really like what Madeline said about the art dare being outside of their comfort zone, because my hope for the art dares is that not necessarily that you create all finished artwork that's amazing and gallery ready, but that it's like a little vacation from your artistic self. Because I'm the same way. I'm not somebody who does collage most of the time. But the nice thing about the art dares is they only last a month. So there's a deadline and okay, I'm done at the end of the month. And so it's not a huge commitment, but it's enough time that you can do something that's not what you normally do. And I think that's important as an artist to take those little vacations.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell myself, this month I'm going to do the art dare. This month I'm going to do the art dare, because it allows you to still work and practice skills, but also gives you that freedom to maybe, or that permission, I should say, to do something you wouldn't usually do.
Dara says, I like the dots through this, like meandering, but also with purpose. Yeah, and they sort of like loop around the cloud. There's even a bee at the bottom, which I didn't even notice until like just
now. Is that an egg in the tree?
Yeah. Is it?
I'm kind of confused about that, about what that is, but I'm interested in it.
Matt About Holly says, is that the weather info in one of the... Oh my God, I love that. That's so brilliant. And we have a comment from Anna who says, it was definitely outside of my comfort zone too. It made me think of collage in a new way. Yeah, oftentimes we have assumptions about certain materials, maybe because we haven't used them very much. I never thought collage was that great until I saw Eloise Sherrod, one of the teaching artists here, and I watched Eloise do it, and I was like, whoa, actually, I didn't know it could be so cool.
Yeah, fun fact, Eloise was the one that designed this project initially, I think. Yeah,
she was. And Blue Wolf says, it's a path from the beehive to the flower from the bee. Oh, wow.
I see it. Thank you.
And Carrie, okay, the bee's messaging. Okay.
You guys are so much smarter than...
I know. Like we're like missing all the critical things. But that's why it's important to have this group view on the work, so we can point things out to each other. Okay, so this next artist is Hannah Korza, who says that their artwork speaks to the current events in our society and the social impacts that are dividing our country. Hannah, I'm going to assume you're from the US because there's a lot of that going on in the US right now. What do you think, Lauryn?
I definitely feel, Hannah, you must be feeling a lot of angst right now and upset, as most of us are, I think, on all sides of the political spectrum here. So the thing that interested me was that beyond the word divided there's a clear white side that is just very intense, and then there's this red side. So you do get this duality going on, the sense of, okay, here is one perspective, here is the other perspective, or the other side.
The paint in the background is really important for this collage, because if you take that away, yes, you can read the headlines and you can see, okay, there's a lot of conflict going on in the US. But the thing is, those two big blocks of paint, they really drive home the idea of division. And I love the simplicity of that, because the newspaper images, they're pretty complicated looking. And so if Hannah did anything like that in the background, it just would be chaos, which, I mean, that sort of describes what's going on as well.
Speaking of which, did you notice, Clara, that in that midline section there, you have that's the only representation of, I guess, the people through these protests on both sides here. You've got this Black Lives Matter protest going on, and then you have this Trump gathering above. I don't know when that image is from, but I think that also serves as a really important point or apex to this, because on the left is things about Biden being elected, Kamala Harris, and then on the right is this news about Trump and the different political decisions that he has made.
W315 is asking, is the white and red a nod to the Russian Revolution of 1917? Oh, I don't know. Hannah didn't mention anything about that, but it's great. Again, it's like you guys bring so much to the conversation that oftentimes we are not able to see on our own. Or W315 says, or is the white and red a nod to the War of the Roses? I don't know, but it's like it could be seen in a number of different ways, which is wonderful. Definitely. And we have to show this pun. I just love this.
Abner always has the best puns. We always say this. Keep them coming.
To bees or not to bees? That is the question. That's a really good one. I love that. Okay, let's take a look at Charlotte Furneaux from the United Kingdom. And Charlotte created 2 collages. So let's actually go to the first one. Okay, so the first one, it's a walking tour map, highlighted the different sections of the articles that Charlotte read and stood out. And Charlotte says the different colors also represent how the topics made me feel, with the arrows showing the order of reading I tend to flick rather than read sequentially. Do you read sequentially, Lauryn, or do you jump all over?
The reason why I don't get through the physical paper, is because I am very stuck to reading left to right. I read sequentially obsessively.
You know what I do when I get the New Yorker? I read all the cartoons first. It's so dumb.
That's the exception, but it's because the cartoons, at least in our local paper, come out in a leaflet. They are separate things, so you can bypass the whole news and just get the cartoons.
I don't know. Part of me feels like a little subversive, not reading the articles and just looking at the cartoons.
That's probably how they sell their papers. They know the cartoons get the most reads or something.
Well, actually, I was reading the Calvin and Hobbes anniversary book. And if you guys haven't seen it, you should read it, because Bill Watterson writes all this stuff explaining the process of comics. And he said for many years, when the newspapers were in their golden age, comics were used to sell papers. That was the purpose of the comics, was to pull people in so that they would then read the rest of the paper. So that's not untrue, actually, when you think about it.
That makes a lot of sense.
So not Hannah. Charlotte explains, I had a lot of fun with this and I found it quite energizing to produce. So Charlotte has a second collage. The words come from the headings of stories, with each letter cut from the area of the story's text. This one's more organized than the chaos of the first collage. And Charlotte also says, collage isn't something I would normally do. I feel like it's a good opportunity to do something new. What do you think about this one, Lauryn?
I think that there is a cool thing going on here with the scale. You have words creating words, which is a interesting meta approach going on. And especially you have these words that are not connected into a sentence. So they do offer this way of looking at the piece, the way that some of you guys read the paper, where you skip to one section, to the next section, to the next section at your leisure.
This is a great point from Carrie Ann, who says the colors keep the eye moving. And that's true. Like if you guys go back to the view of the entire image, you can see how some words go back in space and some pop forward. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, because I think if you didn't have that shift in color, it would all be very flat. And it's easy for that to happen with text. Text tends to do that because it's just so straightforward. Mm-hmm. But I think Charlotte did a great job with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Same with that other piece too. The use of color to move the eye along. That one. Everything is really segmented in a way that feels like this blueprint floor plan, and you can follow those red arrows across the different lands, the different geographies of the news.
Slepnir says, I'm rather impressed at how this dare went beyond what I expected. That's a great comment, because I think it's easy as an artist, and I totally did this when I was in art school, where I was like, I don't need to learn to do that. That's not necessary. I'm a figurative painter. I don't need to learn how to do 3D. But then it's like, once you do it, because you had to take a class or it was required, you go, hey, this is actually kind of cool, right?
Totally. Yeah, same. This inspires me to maybe get back into collage. I don't touch it unless I'm doing mail art, postal art. Otherwise, it's not really incorporated into my work. So this is cool to see you guys do this and get these results.
All right, guys, we have prizes to give out. The prizes go to honorable mention goes to Sarah McGill for their collage titled My Relationship with the News. We were so impressed at how much went into this piece. So much thought that was then executed so thoughtfully. It's a wonderful piece from all different directions.
Yeah, another thing that I wanted to mention about this piece was that the way that the composition is done is a common way to maybe show portraiture, but I think that this goes beyond just a self-portrait, which was really important. It's not just about the news, it's not just self-portrait, it's both integrated together, which was great.
Things are so well integrated. There isn't a single area that feels like it's not a part of something else, and that's hard to do with collage.
Really
collage is. Very quickly looks scatterbrained, it looks all over the place, and Sarah just did a great job of feeding into that chaos, but also finding some degree of order in there. Prize winner is Crosby Morrow for their plant sculpture. So this was such a cool piece. It was not what we expected. And that's a lot of the times what's so exciting about the art dares, because the more typical approach to a project like this is take the newspaper, do the collage, make it two-dimensional, and that's fine. You can see people did great things with that. But whoa, this is like, oh my God, I can't believe you thought of this.
Yeah, it definitely, I think collage tends to make us think about two-dimensional options. And this was not that. It uses the paper in an effective way that's still talking about some kind of way of considering the news, but it also has these other three-dimensional sculptural representational qualities that are all really well considered, because every part of this potted plant is made out of some form of paper, down to that dirt.
Also, I think the craftsmanship in this is really nicely done. Like the branches, the way the pot is done, the texture. I mean, so much is considered at every single stage. And so it's not just the craftsmanship, but just the idea. And that it's a very hopeful piece. It's a piece that feels like it's about something positive. Which unfortunately the news has not been lately. And we just loved the way Crosby had such an unusual take. That's what's fun for me, Lauryn, when I have certain expectations of, okay, people are probably going to do, and then somebody just blasts that out of the water. It's awesome.
It's really sad when hopeful news is an out of the box idea. So maybe that says something about us too, or maybe us collectively, about how we feel, what our mood is in this world right now.
By the way, today is the last day for you guys to get in your entries for the February Art Dare. This was a photography art dare focusing on the elements of art. And tomorrow, we're going to be doing the announcement for the March Art Dare, which is going to be focusing on ink blots. So you guys are going to tune in tomorrow to find out what that is all about. Also, remember to submit your Art Prof Dare. Just tag us on Instagram. You can use hashtag #ArtProfDare. But we also have a submission form on our main site if you guys are not on social media. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And in a few minutes, Lauryn and I will be hanging out in the Art Prof Discord. We will be in the post live streams channel. We can talk about anything you guys want to chat about. Somebody posted something about, I think it was Blue Will Spirit Zappoles. I don't know. Those look really tasty. I was like, how did I not know about this? So maybe we should talk about pastries. That's more fun than the news sometimes.
You guys can recommend some good pastries to me in New York. I don't live in an area with lots of pastries.
Okay, subscribe to our channel and continue to grow and develop as an artist. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters. You guys, the second slide.
It's growing. It's growing. We are almost halfway to filling the second slide. I cannot believe it. Like, how long ago was it that we were just considering adding a second slide, let alone halfway filling it?
Lauryn, I remember the days that we had 4 names.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Me too.
So anyway, thank you guys so much for giving us the support we need. And remember, when you guys support, you're not just supporting us, you're supporting somebody who can't afford an art class. So this is not just about the operating expenses. It's also about helping other people who will never afford an art class. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.